I want to just by way of introduction for those maybe watching online, because I know most of us know Dr. Jerry McGee. But if you don't, Dr. McGee grew up right here in the Robberdale community, in this church. He was here when he was a very young man. And Dr. McGee went on to be the president of Wingate University for 23 years before he retired. When Dr. McGee arrived at Wingate as president, there were 980 students. And when he left, there were 3,200 students. So he did a lot of great work there at Wingate and for this part of North Carolina as well. Dr. McGee said, he left here physically a long time ago, but his heart's always been here. And so we're just thrilled to have him with us today to share with us. He's a little gimpy. He said he jumped over linebackers when he was 65, 66 years old, and now he's hurt himself picking up a suitcase. So that's, you know how that is. You sleep wrong, all of a sudden you can't, you can throw no hitters when you're 20 and then sleep wrong and all of a sudden you can't move your shoulder. So we sympathize with you, but we're just so happy to have you, Dr. McGee. You come and share what the Lord's laid on your heart.
I have always thought it was nice when they had handrails for people who needed them. I really think it's nice now because for the first time I'm needing them. It's always so good to come home. I know you don't see me very often. Many of you have never met me. But I promise you, I moved away from Rockingham in 1975. I lived right across the street here in Forest Hills then. There has never been a day when I have not thought about you and this church and this community. It gave me a chance. It gave my buddies a chance. And we'll always be grateful. Over the years, in my crazy job, I got to speak in a lot of places. I will never forget getting invited to a small mountain church in the far edges, western edges of North Carolina. A friend of mine was pastor there, and he needed to be away, and he called and asked me to come, and I said, man, I got so much going on. It's a long ways up there. I just don't think I can do it. And of course, he kept asking, I really want you to come. I want my people to know you. So I finally agreed to go. So I get there, and I'm no minister, but I did the best I could. I gave him a message from my heart. And actually, I thought it was pretty good. Not my best, but I thought it was pretty good. So when the church was over, people being nice as they are, they would come by and shake my hand and thank you for coming. Our pastor loves you, and we thank you for spending your time with us today. But this one gentleman shook my hand and said, you talk too loud. And, I'm always trying to learn, so I thought, well, that's okay. So I got a little concerned when I noticed he was back in line. And when he got there this time, he said, you talk too long, too. So, okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'll try to do better. And so, lo and behold, I look, and he's at the end of the line again. And when he gets there this time, he says, and what you said really wasn't worth listening to after all. Well, I'm not feeling real good about this. And I turned to somebody and said, well, who is this interesting gentleman over here? And they said, don't worry about old Luke. Said he's a good guy. Said he just walks around in the crowd and repeats what he's heard other people say. Somehow, that didn't make me feel better. Like all of you, my life has had so many blessings. But I want to tell you today that none of the blessings of my life have been more important to me than this church and its people. Since even the earliest days, of the village of Robertdale back in the late 1800s. The people of Robertdale and the people of Robertdale Baptist Church have always been people of grace. It was here in this church that my generation learned to love our neighbors, to care for those in need, to respect our elders. Wonder where that went. To give to the church both our talents and our tithes. And we saw these things demonstrated in our homes by our parents and our community by those we respected. My mom and dad were textile workers. When we were little guys, Mom didn't work. Dad worked over at J.P. Stevens. We were grateful. He had a nice job. Back in those days, if you worked 40 hours a week in a textile mill, you might get home with $70 after all the deductions and things. $70. We had two growing boys. We had a little house payment. We had a little car payment. We had to have water. We had to have lights in our house. We had to eat food. So that $70 got stretched pretty thin. But I'm telling you where the first $7 went. It went to Robertdale Baptist Church. And I will never forget being in church one Sunday, and we needed to build us some Sunday school rooms. Our little church on Back Street in Robertdale was growing, and we needed some room to teach Sunday school. And the pastor asked everyone in the church, can we reach just a little deeper for a few weeks? Can we all share a little more with the church over the next few months so that we can build our Sunday school rooms? Now, the men in the church were going to do the work, but we had to buy the materials. And my little bedroom was right next door to our kitchen in our little four-room house on the corner of Hudson Street and Robertdale Road. And one Sunday night, I remember Mom and Dad in there much later than they ordinarily would be up. And they had a little pad out, and they were scratching out numbers. And they were trying to figure out on that $70 a week they were bringing home. They were trying to figure out for the next few months, was there a way that they could give $10 rather than $7? I have never loved my parents more than when I saw them trying so hard to give us a better church and a place to learn more about Jesus Christ. We all grow up in an environment. Sometimes it's a positive environment, sometimes it's not. The homes of Robertdale, in my day, and especially in my house, we had a little living room. It had two pictures in it. Well, you think, well, I got a brother, so probably a picture of him and probably a picture of me. No. Well, it was probably a couple of family pictures, right? No. They were both of Jesus. There were two pictures in our living room, and they both were Jesus. One when he was sitting among the sheep, and another beautiful picture with long flowing hair that my mother always loved dearly. Somewhere in this church are those two pictures, because I know when we closed down Mom and Dad's house, we gave them this church. Over in the corner, there was a little Bible verse. It was my father's favorite Bible verse. Joshua 24:15. Paraphrased, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. There was a Bible in every room. We didn't just have a Bible. There was a Bible in every room of our house. So it was a constant reminder. The schools were no different. One of my most valued possessions is about this big. The old Robertdale school, not the school we're talking about doing a school, the old school that's still somewhere back over behind the Methodist Church. That's where I started the school in the first grade. The first day of school, Miss Mamie Monroe taught the first grade. She taught in the first grade in the same classroom 42 years. She taught my mother in the first grade. She taught me in the first grade. The first day of school, she handed me a little New Testament. And she had written inside, "Love, Miss Mamie." I don't know where everybody else's New Testament is, but I know that the night I finished high school, that New Testament was in my pocket. The day I graduated from college, that New Testament was in my pocket. The day I got married, that New Testament was in my pocket. The day I was inaugurated as president of Winkie University, to everyone's surprise, including mine, that New Testament was in my pocket. It resides by my bed, and I see it every day of my life. And I got it when I was 7 years old in a public school where we could still do such things. I told the pastor if Robert L. Elementary School becomes a school again, it won't be the first time Bible lessons were taught there, because Bernice McDonald taught us in the 4th and 5th grade. She taught us spelling, she taught us math, she taught us geography, and she taught us the Beatitudes. And it was accepted, and we all loved her so much for doing that. Our lives are sprinkled with great hope and wonderful blessings. And our lives are also sprinkled with unspeakable heartache. I'm 79, so I've experienced all of those things by now. And when I lost my dear mother and my father and my wife in about a 2.5-year period, I remember going and holding Leola Henson's hand and saying, "Leola, when you were my Sunday school teacher when I was 10 years old, when Gurney was my RA leader when I was 10 or 12 years old, you didn't know it, or you were preparing me for this moment. Because you said to me even then, the happiest days of your life, at the darkest moments you ever experienced, God will be present in your life if you will allow him in." And I just told her how grateful I was, that as difficult as those days had been, how they would have been impossible without her love and her direction and the love of Jesus Christ. Now, I think I'm kind of a voice from the past, but I want to talk with you a little bit here about your present and your future. I'm excited about this church. These are such unusual times. I don't know what happened. We got sideways somewhere, and we can't seem to get back on track. But I think we're working our way back. The church attendance is down everywhere I go. Social problems seem to be exploding. People care more about themselves than they do their neighbors. Where do we turn? Where do we find hope and guidance? We find it right here. We find it at Robert L. Baptist Church. The work of this church has never been more important. This lovely church and its loving people stand as a beacon for hope for all that is good and as a pathway to God's grace. Even when you don't know it, you are a reminder to everyone that Christ's love is everlasting. They should not be discouraged, and they should turn to God for the answers to their problems. I love where this church is. In 1957, when I was but a pup, visionary leaders of this church and a visionary pastor said to all of us, we need to grow our church. And we all said, boy, we sure do. Everything's going great. We're going to grow our church. And then they said, and we're going to move out of the village. And we're going to move over to what we used to call 5 Points. And we all said, I don't know about that. We're going Robert L. Baptist Church is going to leave Robert L. See, back in those days, there wasn't any sunny acres. From the bridge to here was like 400 miles. I mean, this was a whole, we're getting close to Rockingham now. It's not Robberdale. What a hard decision it was for the leaders of this church. And there was some people left. Some people went to other churches. And it took 5 years before we could even build the first little building here, where we could start meeting here. And over the years, it's turned out to be the finest and most visionary thing in the history of Robberdale Baptist Church. Now, I think currently you all are on the right path. When I go visit other churches, when I go visit my own church, everybody looks like me. It's not a bad thing. We're pretty good guys. We're pretty good people, and we try to do the right thing. But where are the youth? Where is our future? Well, I'm serious. I go speak in churches where there is no one under 25 years of age. And I think about their future, and it's not very promising. And then I read the stuff you all put out, by the way, and I look at videos about this church. I was so excited about Vacation Bible School this year. What a wonderful Vacation Bible School you had, and how wonderful it was that so many people in the church chipped in and helped out and participated. I was especially glad to see a lot of men participating. When I went to Vacation Bible School, it was about 3 mamas and a preacher, and that was pretty much it. But I was so happy to see this church invested in that program. And now I hear about the school, 132 young people. And what could the future hold? I mean, the numbers are exciting. And I promise you, as a father and as a grandfather of 9, if you want my heart involved and you want me involved, you involve my children and grandchildren, I'll be there. And I think we all feel that way. So I think you have figured out a great way to pursue an exciting future for this church. And that's by providing for the young people. I want to encourage you to expand that ministry as you are able. We all have financial limits. We all know that. We can only do what we can do. But when I had lunch with the minister a few months ago, and I said, well, there's real exciting plans. How are you going to pay for it? And he said, we believe that God will provide if we do the right thing. And I do too. And I congratulate you on having that kind of commitment. Recently, I've been in touch with a dozen, 15 maybe, of my Robberdale buddies. We've been trying to plan another Robberdale reunion. It's kind of hard to do. And as I was talking to them and looking at them and looking at their lives, they all grew up right here with me in this church and in the Methodist church. At one time, there were 360 people who lived in Robberdale. I know because I delivered a newspaper. I knew everybody. 360 people lived in Robberdale. We had 3 churches. Average Sunday attendance was 400. We had more people going to church in Robberdale than we had people living in Robberdale, because it was the thing to do and it was the place to be. But when I gathered my little buddies from Robberdale and look around, without fail, every one of them has led a wonderful life. Some have had more money than others. Some have had more prestigious jobs than others, but that doesn't matter. They have had a wonderful life. They've raised their families. They've done the things they should do in their communities. They have had their hearts in the right place because of the influence of this church, and Robberdale United Methodist Church, and even Robberdale Presbyterian Church. It wasn't here very long. You are so important. You have been, and you are, and you will be. I saw my brother yesterday. He asked me to please give you his regards. In closing, I just want to say thank you for providing my brother and me and our buddies and our girlfriends a place to grow and a place to worship during our childhood. You have been, you are, and you will continue to be a great blessing to many others. May God continue to wrap his loving arms around this, my church, and you, my people. Thank you.
Appreciate Dr. McGee and all he's done in our community, our state, and for the cause of education. And it all started in Robert Dale, the community and in this church. And so, the challenge I have this morning is, where will you be at the end of your career? Some of you have already retired, but we don't retire from the Lord's work. We don't retire from serving God. And so, where will you be when you reach your final graduation? I had a funeral yesterday for my very best childhood friend. He was only 56 years old, and he died very suddenly a week ago. And the one thing, without fail, that everyone said about him was that he squeezed so much life into those 56 years, affected so many people. And it truly, the kind of things people were saying to me are the kind of things, that I would love for people to think about me when I make that final graduation, as he has. I ask you just to bow your heads, if you will, for a moment. And to consider, when you get to the end of your career, when you get to that place of the final graduation, are you certain the Lord Jesus is going to reach out his hand and say, "Welcome home. Well done, good and faithful servant"? If you can't say without any doubt that those will be his words, I'm going to give you an opportunity to trust him today. Settle that issue once and for all. Christian, if you've not been doing the things that he's called you to do, if you're not actively making disciples, if you're not actively serving the Lord, would you rededicate your life? Would you recommit yourself? If God's led you to this church and he wants you to serve here, our doors are open, and we ask you to be obedient, to come, get involved. Maybe you're sitting home and you're a member of this church, but you haven't been involved in a long time. We invite you to come back, to surrender yourself completely and serve him. Maybe you need someone to pray with you this morning, or you need to kneel at this altar and lift up some concern. Will you be obedient today? Heavenly Father, you know our hearts. We thank you for Dr. McGee. We thank you for the message he shared with us, the encouragement we received from him today. We recognize that we each have a calling, and it's a high calling. It's the most most wonderful opportunity we'll ever have as human beings, and that is to serve you, to share the good news of Jesus with others. We don't have to be preachers. We don't have to be college presidents. We are to share the gospel wherever we go. Help us, Lord, to recognize that high calling and not just leave it up to the professionals, but to do what you've called each of us to do. We love you, Lord. Help us now to be obedient to you. Prove our love to you. Make our prayer in Jesus' name.